The smell of fear is different from what humans believe. It's not sweat or trembling hands. It's something sharper, like metal left too long in the rain. Tonight, as I stood at the edge of the crowded ballroom, that scent hung heavy in the air, though I was the only one who could detect it. "Smile, Emma," my adoptive mother whispered, her fingers digging into my forearm with practiced precision, enough pressure to command, not enough to bruise where others might see. "The Thorpe family has been generous to host us. The least you can do is appear grateful." I fixed my face into what I hoped was an acceptable expression, one I'd practiced countless times in the bathroom mirror of our modest home. Not too eager, not too blank, human, normal, forgettable. The crystal chandelier above us scattered light across the marble floor, each reflection like a small, trapped star. 10 years of practice had made me proficient at these performances, at being Emma Foster, the quiet adopted daughter of the town's respected doctor and his socialite wife. My silver pendant, the only thing I had from my real mother, hung heavy between my collarbones, hidden beneath the high neckline of my blue dress. The pendant was etched with a crescent moon partially covered by clouds. A warning, perhaps, though I'd never fully understood its meaning. My birth mother had pressed it into my palm the night she'd left me at the edge of the forest, her whispered words fading as she disappeared into the darkness. "Never let them see what you are." "Look who's arrived," Mrs. Foster said, her voice dropping to the hushed tone reserved for gossip and threats. The delegation from the north. I didn't need to turn to know who she meant. The energy in the room had shifted, conversations faltering as a new presence commanded attention. The annual Hunters Ball was the most prestigious event in our small mountain town, but this year it carried additional significance. For the first time in decades, representatives from the Northern Territories had crossed the border, officially for diplomatic reasons. Though rumors painted different pictures, I kept my eyes down, focusing on the delicate pattern of the marble floor. Looking too interested would draw questions. Looking too nervous might draw worse. The Northern Territories remained wild and largely unmapped, governed by their own laws and leaders. Leaders who, according to whispered stories, were something other than human. "Such savages," Mrs. Foster continued, her smile never faltering. "But with land rights at stake, the mayor insisted we play nice. Just stay clear of them, Emma. Men like that see a pretty blonde girl like you and get ideas." If only she knew. If only any of them knew what truly lurked beneath my carefully constructed human facade. The irony almost made me smile. I'd been 10 years old when the Fosters found me wandering near death at the forest's edge, with no memory except my first name, and the silver pendant clutched in my small fist. They'd taken me in, not out of kindness, I'd later realize, but because childless couples of their status were expected to demonstrate charitable hearts. I became their project, their living proof of goodness. What they didn't know, what no one could know, was that sometimes, when the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, I would slip from my bedroom window and run into the forest. There, safe from human eyes, I would let the change take me, bones shifting, senses sharpening, pale fur emerging where skin had been. In those precious hours, I could be what I truly was. Though I had no pack, no history, no understanding of my nature beyond instinct and necessity. A sudden hush fell over the ballroom, more complete than before. The hair at the nape of my neck rose, an involuntary response to a primal awareness I couldn't suppress. "That's him," someone whispered nearby. The Alpha King himself. Despite every self-preservation instinct, I looked up. He stood at the entrance, taller than the men flanking him, his presence commanding the space without effort. Dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from something harder than flesh, all angles and shadows under the chandelier light. Even in formal attire, a black suit that somehow appeared both elegant and battle-ready, there was something untamed about him. His eyes moved methodically across the room, assessing, cataloging. Then his gaze locked with mine. A shock ran through me, electric and terrifying. In that instant, I knew with bone-deep certainty that he saw me. Not Emma Foster in her blue dress with her practiced smile, but what lurked beneath. My heart thundered against my ribs as his nostrils flared slightly, his head tilting in a gesture so subtle no human would notice its significance. He knows. "Emma?" Mrs. Foster's voice seemed to come from a great distance. Emma, you're shaking. What's wrong? I tore my gaze away, but the damage was done. Nothing. I managed, the lie bitter on my tongue. Just a chill. I think I need some air. Before she could protest, I slipped away, moving through the crowd with the careful, measured steps of prey, trying not to trigger a predator's chase instinct. The balcony doors offered escape, and the cool night air hit my flushed skin like a blessing. The mountains rose dark against the sky, their familiar silhouette a comfort I desperately needed. Somewhere in those peaks, I knew, were others like me, perhaps even the answers to questions I'd been afraid to ask myself. Who had my mother been? Why had she hidden me among humans? What was the danger she'd been protecting me from? You hide it well, came a deep voice from behind me, but not well enough. I didn't turn. Couldn't turn. My fingers gripped the stone balustrade, knuckles white with the effort of appearing calm. I don't know what you mean. He moved beside me, not looking at me but out toward the mountains, as though they held some shared secret. This close, I could sense what humans couldn't, the power radiating from him, ancient and absolute, not just any werewolf, but an alpha of alphas, a king. 10 years among them, he said, his voice low enough that only enhanced hearing would catch it. Impressive. Most would have broken, run, or been discovered. Yet here you stand, wearing their clothes, speaking their language, playing their games. My throat tightened. Please, I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was asking for. Mercy? Silence? Something else entirely? He turned then, and I forced myself to meet his gaze. His eyes weren't the brown or blue I'd expected, but a startling amber that seemed to glow with internal light, predator's eyes. What's your name? He asked. Your real name. Emma, I answered automatically, then corrected myself. At least, that's what I've been called since I was found. I don't remember anything before that. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. You don't know what you are? A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. I know I'm not human. I know that when the full moon rises, I change. I know to hide, to be quiet, to never let anyone see. I touched the pendant beneath my dress. But beyond that? No. He studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I held steady. If this was to be my undoing, if 10 years of careful deception were to end tonight on this balcony, I would at least face it with what dignity I could muster. Interesting, he finally said, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. You're coming with us when we leave tomorrow. It wasn't a request. The casual authority in his voice made that clear. I can't just disappear, I protested, though the thought of finally finding answers, of being among my own kind, sent a dangerous thrill through me. The Fosters are not your family, he cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. They are your jailers, whether they realize it or not. And this place, he gestured toward the glittering ballroom behind us, is your prison. Before I could respond, the balcony doors opened, spilling light and conversation into our private moment. Mrs. Foster stood framed in the doorway, her eyes narrowing at the sight of us standing close together. Emma, she called, her smile tight. You're needed inside, dear. The Alpha King turned to face her, and I saw her falter slightly under his gaze, though she couldn't possibly understand why her instincts were screaming danger. Mrs. Foster, he said, his voice smoothly polite in a way that somehow made it more threatening. Your daughter and I were just discussing the Northern Territories. She seems quite knowledgeable about our customs. Fear flashed in her eyes, quickly masked. Emma has always been an avid reader, but I'm afraid I must insist she join us inside. Family obligation, you understand. His smile was all teeth. Family is indeed everything to our kind. She didn't catch the double meaning, but I did. As I moved to follow her back inside, he caught my wrist, his touch sending a shock of awareness through my skin. Leaning close, he whispered, the North Gate, dawn. Come alone. Then he released me, nodding politely to Mrs. Foster, as if he hadn't just upended my entire existence. Inside, the ball continued, couples swirling across the floor in practiced patterns. I moved through the evening in a daze, responding automatically to questions, smiling when expected, all while my mind raced with impossible decisions. Leave everything I'd known for a decade? Trust this stranger who had seen through me with a single glance? Or continue this half-life, always hiding, always afraid? As midnight approached, the mayor called for attention, raising a glass to our distinguished visitors from the north and the promise of cooperation between our territories. Throughout his speech, I felt the Alpha King's eyes on me, patient and certain, as though my decision had already been made. Perhaps it had been, long before tonight. Perhaps it had been made the moment my mother had left me at the forest's edge, with nothing but a silver pendant and a warning. When I finally returned home that night, I sat at my window, watching the moon, nearly full but not quite, and felt the familiar pull in my blood. For the first time in 10 years, I allowed myself to consider a life where I wouldn't have to hide what I was, a life among others like me. Dawn was only hours away. By then, I would need to choose. Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my small bedroom, touching familiar objects as if to memorize them. The worn paperbacks lining my shelves, the faded quilt my adoptive grandmother had given me before she passed, the collection of smooth stones I'd gathered from the forest floor during my secret midnight runs. 10 years of carefully constructed normalcy, all of it suddenly paper-thin. Outside my window, the sky began its slow transformation from black to deep blue. Dawn approached, and with it, my moment of choice. I hadn't packed. That would make this real, irreversible. Instead, I changed into practical clothes, jeans, a warm sweater, sturdy boots. I slipped the silver pendant from beneath my pillow and fastened it around my neck, no longer hidden, but displayed openly for what felt like the first time. The Foster's house was silent as I crept downstairs. In the kitchen, I paused, pen hovering over paper as I considered what to write. What could possibly explain this disappearance? In the end, I settled for simplicity. I'm sorry. Thank you for everything. Please don't look for me. Emma. The words seemed inadequate for a decade of shared life, however complicated that life had been. But perhaps that was fitting. I had been Emma Foster on the surface, while something else entirely remained locked inside. No explanation I could offer would bridge that divide. The pre-dawn air bit at my cheeks as I slipped out the back door and through the garden. Our town was built against the northern mountain range, with the ancient North Gate marking the boundary between civilization and wilderness. Once a trading post, it had been sealed when relations with the northern territories deteriorated generations ago. Only recently, with this new diplomatic initiative, had it been reopened. As I approached, mist curled around my ankles, and the scent of pine and earth filled my nostrils, sharper than usual. My senses were heightening, responding to both danger and possibility. The gate itself was a massive stone archway, ivy-covered and imposing against the lightening sky. He was already there, alone as promised, a dark silhouette against the gray dawn. No longer in formal attire, he wore what I assumed was the clothing of his people, practical leather and dark fabric, designed for movement rather than show. Power emanated from him even more strongly here, away from the confines of human society. "You came," he said, not sounding particularly surprised. "I have questions," I replied, standing my ground despite every instinct urging me to show submission before this alpha predator. A slight smile curved his lips. "I expected nothing less, but the answers you seek aren't found in words. They're in the mountains, in the pack, in the blood and bone of what you are." He held out his hand. "My name is Dominic Blackthorne. I am Alpha King of the Northern Packs, and I'm offering you passage home, little wolf." The use of that term, little wolf, sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. Not of fear, but recognition, as though a name I'd forgotten had suddenly been spoken. "How did you know?" I asked, not moving closer, not yet taking his offered hand. "Last night, the moment you saw me." "Your scent," he said simply. "You've masked it well, buried it beneath human perfumes and soaps. But to one of us, especially an alpha, it's unmistakable." His amber eyes studied me, though I admit, finding one of our kind living as human was unexpected, especially one with your lineage. My heart skipped. My lineage? You know who I am? I have suspicions, he said, his expression suddenly guarded. The pendant you wear is distinctive. Instinctively, my hand went to the silver crescent at my throat. This? It was my mother's. It's all I have of her. Something flashed in his eyes. Recognition, certainly, but also something darker. Then my suspicions may be correct. All the more reason you should come with me now. We've lingered too long already. As if to emphasize his point, voices drifted from the direction of town. The early risers would be starting their day. Bakers, farmers, the doctor making his morning rounds. Dr. Foster would soon discover my note. Fear and exhilaration battled within me. I had lived so long in careful control, never allowing myself to fully feel or act on instinct. Now instinct screamed at me to run, not away from this man, but with him, toward the mountains and whatever truth awaited me there. I took his hand. His grip was warm and sure, calloused in ways that spoke of a life lived far from human luxury. Without another word, he led me through the gate and onto a narrow path that quickly disappeared into dense forest. The trees closed around us, ancient sentinels that had witnessed the passing of generations before us. Beneath their canopy, the sense of the wild world intensified. Moss and decaying leaves, small animals scurrying for cover, the mineral tang of a distant stream. How far? I asked, though distance seemed a poor measure for the journey I was undertaking. We'll reach the first pack boundary by nightfall, he replied, setting a pace that would have been grueling for a human, but felt natural to my body. My escort awaits us 5 miles ahead. I came to the gate alone as promised, but we don't travel unprotected in these woods. Are there dangers? Even for us? He glanced back, his expression unreadable, always. Some from rival packs with territorial disputes, some from humans who hunt what they fear. And some... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Some dangers are older than both our kinds. The cryptic answer sent a chill through me. I wanted to press for details, but something in his demeanor suggested now wasn't the time. Instead, I focused on keeping pace, on the strange joy of moving freely through the forest without pretense or fear of discovery. Here. I didn't need to hide what I was. Here. My strength and speed weren't liabilities, but gifts. As the morning progressed, the terrain grew steeper, the path barely visible to human eyes, but clear to my enhanced senses. Dominic moved ahead with the confidence of one traveling a familiar route, occasionally pausing to ensure I followed. He offered no small talk, no reassurances, and strangely, I appreciated that. Platitudes would have felt false after years of secrets. You said pack boundary, I ventured when we stopped briefly beside a swift-running creek. How many packs are there? He cupped water in his hands, drinking deeply before answering. 7 major packs in the Northern Territories, each with its own alpha. As Alpha King, I maintain the peace between them, settle disputes, and lead when we face common threats. And which pack? I couldn't finish the question. Which is yours? His gaze was penetrating. That remains to be seen. The pendant you wear suggests possibilities, but blood will tell. Before I could ask what he meant by that, he tensed, head lifting as he scented the air. I followed suit, suddenly aware of new presences surrounding us. At least 5 distinct scents, all werewolf, all approaching rapidly. Your escort? I asked, fighting the urge to retreat. He nodded, a subtle gesture that somehow conveyed both confirmation and command. Stay close. Stay calm. They emerged from the trees like shadows given form, moving with predatory grace that made my breath catch. 3 men and 2 women, all carrying themselves with the unmistakable confidence of apex predators. They wore similar clothing to Dominic's, practical leather and dark fabrics, with various weapons strapped to their bodies. My king, the foremost man said, inclining his head in a gesture of respect. His eyes, a startling green against brown skin, flicked to me with obvious curiosity. This is a lost daughter of the North, Dominic replied, his tone brooking no questions. Riker, take point. Nora, guard our rear. We make for the Silver Pass before nightfall. They accepted his commands without hesitation, though I felt their curious glances as they arranged themselves around us. The formation was clearly protective, with Dominic keeping me close at his side as we resumed our journey. "They have questions," I murmured, low enough that only he would hear. "As do we all," he returned. "But curiosity doesn't override security. You'll meet the pack properly when we reach our territory." The journey continued in watchful silence. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the forest began to change, pines giving way to ancient, gnarled trees I couldn't name. The air grew thinner, crisper, carrying scents that were both foreign and strangely familiar, as though I'd once known them in a dream. By midday, muscles I rarely used in human society burned pleasantly with exertion. We stopped in a small clearing, and the escorts produced dried meat and berries from their packs. I accepted the offering gratefully, only now realizing how hungry I'd become. As I ate, the female werewolf named Nora approached, her movements deliberately casual. She appeared older than the others, with silver threading through her dark braided hair and lines of experience etched around her eyes. "You've lived among humans long," she observed, her voice neither accusatory nor particularly friendly. "Your movements are restrained." I swallowed my food, unsure if I was being criticized. "Yes, for 10 years. She nodded as though confirming something to herself. "And your shifts? During the moons?" "Alone," I admitted, "in the forest, as far from town as I could manage." Something like sympathy crossed her weathered features. "No pack to guide you, to teach you control and purpose." She shook her head. "It's a wonder you survived with your mind intact." Was that what I'd done? Survived? It had never occurred to me that living as I had, suppressing my true nature, running alone under moonlight, might have broken something essential in me. Yet here, surrounded by others like myself for the first time in memory, I felt an emptiness I hadn't recognized until now. "The king has his reasons for bringing you," Nora continued, her voice dropping. "But understand this. Pack is not just blood and claws. It's law, tradition, hierarchy. If you're to find your place among us, you'll need to learn quickly what most cubs absorb from birth." Before I could respond, Dominic called for us to continue. As we resumed our journey, his pace quickened, suggesting urgency he hadn't displayed before. "Is something wrong?" I asked when I caught up to his side. His jaw tightened. "We're being tracked." Fear spiked through me, sharper for being in unfamiliar territory. "Humans?" "No." His face was grim. "Rogues. Werewolves without pack allegiance, without the restraint pack law provides. Dangerous? Very." He guided me over a fallen log with a hand at the small of my back, the touch brief but steadying. "Especially to you." "Why me specifically?" His eyes met mine, serious and intent. "Because you wear that pendant, because you smell of both human world and wolf blood, because whatever you are, whoever you are, matters. And rogues have masters who would use that." The cryptic answer raised more questions than it answered, but the urgency in our pace suggested now wasn't the time to press. The escorts had tightened their formation, hands straying more frequently to their weapons. Even the forest seemed to have grown quiet, birds and small creatures silenced by the tension in the air. We climbed higher, the path growing steeper until it became less a trail and more a series of rocky switchbacks cutting through increasingly sparse vegetation. My lungs burned with the altitude, but beneath the discomfort was a growing sense of rightness, of belonging. Something in me recognized these mountains, these smells, this light. As afternoon waned toward evening, we reached a narrow pass between towering rock faces. The Silver Pass, Dominic had called it. The stone here gleamed with embedded quartz that caught the fading sunlight, sending fractured rainbows dancing across our path. "We cross here," Dominic said, "and we'll be in the territory of my pack, the Night Runners. Few rogues would dare follow us across this boundary." The relief in the escort's posture was visible. Riker, the green-eyed man who'd first addressed Dominic, allowed himself a small smile. "Home ground," he said with satisfaction. As we entered the pass, the temperature dropped abruptly, my breath fogged before me, and the hair on my arms rose. Not from cold alone, but from a sudden, inexplicable sense of being watched. The pendant at my throat seemed to grow heavy, almost warm against my skin. Dominic noticed my reaction, his eyes narrowing. "You feel it?" It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "What is this place?" "Sacred ground," he replied, voice low with respect. "The boundary between territories was set here for a reason. The Silver Pass has properties that help maintain balance between the packs. Most werewolves sense it only as discomfort, a place to move through quickly rather than linger. But I struggled to articulate the strange resonance humming through my blood. Connected, somehow, his expression sharpened with interest. "The pendant. Let me see it properly." I lifted the silver crescent from my neck, holding it so the last rays of sunlight struck its surface. The metal seemed to capture the light, holding it rather than reflecting it, glowing with an inner luminescence. Dominic inhaled sharply. The escort team had gone utterly still, their expressions ranging from awe to alarm. "It's true, then," Nora whispered, her earlier composure cracked by genuine emotion. "She bears the Moonshadow crest." Dominic's eyes never left my face. "The lost bloodline returns." Moonshadow? The word felt strange on my tongue, yet somehow familiar, like a lullaby heard in infancy and long forgotten. What does that mean? The silence that followed my question was heavy with unspoken history. The escort team exchanged glances, their earlier wariness now mingled with what looked unsettlingly like reverence. "We should continue this discussion behind pack walls," Dominic finally said, his voice deliberately neutral. "Night falls quickly in the mountains." As if summoned by his words, shadows lengthened around us, filling the pass with pockets of darkness. The quartz veins running through the stone still captured light, creating an eerie path of glimmering footsteps before us. I returned the pendant to its place against my skin, feeling its warmth like a small sun. We moved swiftly through the remainder of the pass, emerging onto a plateau that offered a breathtaking view of the valley beyond. Below us stretched a vast forest, dark green and impenetrable to human eyes, bisected by a silver ribbon of river. And nestled where forest met mountain, lights, not the harsh electric glow of human settlements, but the warmer flicker of fire and oil lamps, indicating a substantial community. "Blackthorn Valley," Dominic said, a hint of pride in his tone. "Home to the Night Runners for 15 generations. From here, we govern the 7 packs." Even at this distance, my enhanced senses detected movement among the structures. People going about evening routines, smoke from cooking fires, the faint echo of voices carried on the mountain air. A community of my kind. The realization hit me with unexpected force, a wave of emotion I struggled to control. Dominic must have sensed my reaction. It's overwhelming, I know, especially for one who's been alone so long. I swallowed around the sudden tightness in my throat. I've never seen another werewolf shift, never ran with others, never even spoke to someone who knew what I was. His expression softened slightly, the stern alpha king giving way to something more personal. "Then tonight will hold many firsts for you." We descended along a path that would have been treacherous to human feet, but posed no challenge to our sure-footed group. As we neared the settlement, I could make out more details, structures built of stone and timber that blended seamlessly with their surroundings, gardens and training grounds. A central gathering space dominated by a massive fire pit. It was nothing like the human towns I knew, with their grid streets and artificial boundaries. This place had grown organically from the land itself. Figures appeared at the settlement's edge, clearly alerted to our approach. Some held torches, their flames dancing in the deepening twilight. As we drew closer, their scents reached me. Dozens of werewolves, each unique yet carrying a common thread that marked them as pack. "My king returns," someone called, setting off a ripple of welcoming howls that raised goosebumps along my arms. The sound awoke something primal in me, an answering call I barely managed to suppress. Dominic stepped ahead as we reached the first buildings, accepting the greetings of his people with dignified nods. I stayed close behind him, suddenly aware of how foreign I must appear in my human clothing, with my human mannerisms. Curious eyes tracked my every movement, nostrils flared to capture my scent, whispers following in our wake. "Who is she?" "The king brought her himself." That pendant. Is that... Impossible. That bloodline ended years ago. A sturdy building of stone and dark wood dominated the settlement's center, clearly a place of significance. Dominic led our small group directly toward it, the crowd parting respectfully before him. At the building's entrance stood an elderly man, his white hair and lined face contrasting with the straight-backed strength of his posture. Elder Thorne. Dominic greeted him with evident respect. The old man's eyes, still sharp and wolf gold despite his years, moved directly to me. "So," he said, his voice weathered but strong, "the rumors already running through the pack are true. You've found a moonshadow." "I've found someone wearing a moonshadow pendant," Dominic corrected carefully. "The council should convene before we make further claims." Elder Thorne nodded gravely. "Indeed. The last false hope nearly tore the packs apart." His penetrating gaze remained fixed on me. "Girl, do you know what you carry around your neck?" I fought the urge to shrink beneath his scrutiny. Only that it was my mother's. "I've had it since she left me at the forest's edge 10 years ago." "Left you?" Sharp interest flared in his expression. "Not killed?" I don't know," I admitted. "I was young. My memories are fragmented. I remember her telling me to hide what I am then. Nothing clear until the Fosters found me." The elder's gaze softened fractionally. "Come inside. This is no conversation for public ears." The building's interior was warm and surprisingly well-appointed. A large central room featured a circular stone hearth, comfortable seating, and walls hung with intricate tapestries depicting woodland scenes and wolf packs. A staircase curved upward to a second level, and several doorways led to adjoining rooms. "Wait here," Dominic told his escort team. "Guard the entrance. No one enters without my direct permission." They nodded, taking up positions with practiced efficiency. Dominic guided me deeper into the building, following Elder Thorne through a heavy wooden door into what appeared to be a council chamber. A massive table of polished wood dominated the space, surrounded by 12 carved chairs. Maps covered one wall, marked with symbols I didn't recognize. "Sit," Elder Thorne instructed, gesturing to the table. I obeyed, feeling increasingly like a specimen under examination. Dominic remained standing, his posture alert as Elder Thorne circled the table to face me directly. "Your name?" the elder asked. "Emma Foster," I replied, then corrected myself. "At least that's what I've been called. I don't know my birth name. And your age?" 20, approximately, the doctors estimated when I was found. Elder Thorne nodded, as though confirming calculations in his head. "The timing fits," he murmured, more to himself than to us. To me, he said, "The pendant." "May I see it?" With hesitant fingers, I removed the silver crescent and placed it in his outstretched palm. The old man's breath caught as he held it, turning it to catch the light from the oil lamps. "Authentic," he pronounced after a moment of intense examination. "The metalwork is unmistakable. Moonshadow craft. And it carries her scent still, faintly." "Whose scent?" I asked, unable to keep the eagerness from my voice. The elder's eyes met mine, compassion tempering his earlier scrutiny. "Lyra Moonshadow, the last known alpha female of her bloodline." My heart lurched painfully. "My mother? She was an alpha?" "If you are indeed her daughter, yes." Elder Thorne handed the pendant back with careful reverence. The Moonshadows were not just any werewolf bloodline. They were the keepers of our most sacred laws and traditions, the balance bringers between wolf and human worlds. Dominic spoke then, his deep voice filling the chamber. "The Moonshadow Pack was believed destroyed in the Blood Moon Massacre, 12 years ago, an attack orchestrated by human hunters and..." His jaw tightened. "Traitors within our own kind. All were thought killed," Elder Thorne continued. "Lyra, her mate, their entire pack. The loss devastated our society, disrupted the balance between territories. We've managed in their absence, but..." He shook his head. "Things are not as they should be." My mind struggled to absorb these revelations. Not just a werewolf, but the daughter of alphas, part of a bloodline important enough that its loss had destabilized an entire society. The weight of this identity pressed against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. "If what you say is true," I managed, "why would my mother hide me among humans? Why not take me to another pack for protection?" Elder Thorn and Dominic exchanged a significant look. The moon shadows possessed abilities beyond those of ordinary werewolves, Dominic said carefully. Abilities that some coveted, others feared. "What abilities?" "The pendant you wear," Elder Thorn replied instead of answering directly. "Do you notice how it warms against your skin? How it sometimes seems to glow from within?" I nodded slowly. No ordinary werewolf would experience that. The silver would feel cold, even slightly repellent to our kind. "That it responds to you," his voice trailed off meaningfully. "What does it mean?" I pressed, frustration building at their cryptic responses. "It means," Dominic said, his amber eyes intent on mine, "that you may indeed be what we've needed, what the territories have needed since the night of the massacre, but confirming it will require more than a pendant and timing." A knock at the door interrupted us. At Dominic's command, one of the escort team, Riker, entered, his expression grave. "My king, scouts report movement at the eastern boundary. A hunting party from the Stoneclaw pack approaches." Dominic's posture stiffened. "Invited?" "No, my king. And they travel armed for more than simple game." Elder Thorn's weathered face hardened with concern. "Vane Stoneclaw has grown bold in his challenges since the last council." "Or desperate," Dominic replied, his tone grim, "especially if rumors of her arrival have already spread." He nodded toward me. My stomach knotted with unease. "Who is Vane Stoneclaw?" "Alpha of the Stoneclaw pack," Elder Thorn explained, "and the most vocal opponent of Blackthorn leadership. He believes the Alpha King position should rotate among packs rather than remain with the Blackthorn bloodline. He also," Dominic added darkly, "had much to gain from the Moonshadow massacre. His territory expanded considerably when there was no one left to challenge his claims. The implications were clear, even to me. If I represented some kind of threat to this Vane's power or territory, my presence here could trigger conflict between packs." "I should leave," I said, rising from my seat. "I never meant to bring danger to your people." Dominic's hand on my shoulder stopped me, the touch firm but not unkind. "You are not leaving. If you are who we believe you may be, your safety is paramount to all 7 territories. And if I'm not," I challenged, meeting his gaze directly. "What happens to me then?" The question hung in the air between us, unanswered as Dominic turned to address Riker. "Double the border patrols. Invoke pack law. No Stoneclaw crosses our boundary without surrendering their weapons and submitting to escort." Riker nodded and departed swiftly. Elder Thorn rose with a soft groan, his age showing momentarily before he straightened. "I will convene the council," he said. "They should meet her before rumors distort the truth beyond recognition." Dominic nodded his agreement. "Tonight, after moonrise. Until then," his eyes returned to me, "our guest should rest and prepare. The council's questions will not be gentle." Elder Thorn departed with surprising agility for one his age, leaving Dominic and me alone in the council chamber. The silence between us felt charged with unasked questions and unspoken warnings. "You still haven't answered me," I finally said. "What happens if I'm not who you think I am?" Dominic studied me, his expression unreadable. "Then you are still a werewolf without a pack, which makes you my responsibility while in Night Runner territory." He moved toward the door. "Come. You should rest and change before the council meets." He led me up the curved staircase to the building's 2nd level, where a series of doors lined a wide hallway. Opening one, he revealed a comfortable bedchamber with a large window overlooking the settlement. "These are guest quarters for visiting pack representatives," he explained. "You'll find suitable clothing in the wardrobe. Someone will bring food shortly." I stepped into the room, feeling strangely disoriented by its simple luxury after years of pretending to be human. The bed was covered in furs rather than conventional blankets, the furniture crafted from the same dark wood that seemed common in the settlement. A small hearth provided warmth, already lit against the mountain chill. "The council," I began, turning back to Dominic. "What should I expect?" Questions. Many questions. His powerful frame filled the doorway, neither entering fully nor leaving. Some will want to believe immediately that you are Lyra's daughter. The return of the Moonshadow line would restore balance that's been missing for years. Others will be skeptical, protective of the status quo they've established in the absence of your bloodline. And which are you? I asked, watching him carefully. Something flickered in his amber eyes. Caution, perhaps, or calculation. I am Alpha King. My responsibility is to all 7 packs, not my personal hopes or fears. He started to turn away, then paused. One piece of advice. When the council asks about your shifting, be honest. If you truly are a Moonshadow, even an untrained one, your wolf form will speak more truth than words ever could. With that cryptic statement, he left, closing the door behind him. I heard no lock turn, not a prisoner then, but certainly not free to leave either. Alone for the first time since dawn, I moved to the window, watching as evening activities continued in the settlement below. Werewolves of all ages moved about their business, so similar to humans in many ways, yet fundamentally different. They moved with unconscious grace, their gestures more expressive, their connections to each other visible in casual touches and easy physical proximity. No need to hide their strength or suppress their instincts here. The wardrobe yielded clothing that seemed designed for practicality and movement. Soft leather pants, a loose linen shirt, a warm vest embroidered with subtle patterns that reminded me of forest shadows. After a quick wash with water from a pitcher left by the bedside, I changed, marveling at how different these clothes felt from the restrictive human fashion I'd grown accustomed to. A soft knock announced the arrival of food. A young woman, perhaps a few years younger than myself, carrying a tray laden with roasted meat, bread, and what looked like wild greens. She set it down without meeting my eyes, her movements nervous. "Thank you," I said gently. She glanced up then, curiosity overwhelming her shyness. "Is it true?" she blurted out. "Are you really a Moonshadow?" "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "I'm still learning what that would mean." She bit her lip, clearly conflicted about whether to say more. "My grandmother used to tell stories about the Moonshadows," she finally confided, "how they could walk between worlds, how the moon blessed them with gifts beyond other werewolves. She said when they ran under a full moon, their fur shone like silver." Before I could respond, a sharp voice called from the hallway. The girl jumped guiltily. "I should go. The king said not to bother you with questions." She slipped out, leaving me with more questions than before. Walk between worlds, gifts beyond other werewolves. These cryptic references to Moonshadow abilities were becoming frustrating in their vagueness. I ate quickly, my body demanding fuel after the day's exertions. The food was simpler than what I was accustomed to, but deeply satisfying. Meat cooked rare, bread hearty and fresh, the greens carrying complex flavors I couldn't name. As I finished, the quality of light through the window changed, growing silver bright. Moonrise. The familiar pull began in my blood, that sweet ache of transformation held at bay by will alone. Tonight's moon wasn't full, perhaps 3/4, but after the emotional intensity of the day, my wolf nature strained closer to the surface than usual. Another knock, firmer this time, preceded Nora's entrance. The older werewolf carried a small wooden box, her expression serious. "The council gathers," she announced. "But first, something practical." "Your scent." "My scent?" I repeated, confused. "You smell of human soaps and perfumes," she explained, opening the box to reveal small pouches of what looked like herbs and oils. "It creates dissonance. For wolves who've never lived among humans, it will be distracting during the council meeting." I hadn't considered this aspect of my deception, how the very products I'd used to seem human might now mark me as an outsider here. "These are traditional preparations," Nora continued, removing a small vial. "Plant oils from our territory. They'll help align your external scent with your true nature. May I?" At my nod, she poured a small amount of oil into her palm and approached. With surprising gentleness, she applied it to my pulse points, wrists, throat, behind ears. The scent was complex and wild. Pine resin, mountain herbs, something musky and primal. "There," she said, stepping back. "Better. Now you smell of the north, as you should." The effect was more profound than I'd expected. With each breath of the oil's scent, my senses sharpened, the wolf inside me responding to these ancestral smells. My skin tingled where Nora had applied the oil, as though awakening to something long suppressed. "It's time," she said, watching my reaction with knowing eyes. "They're waiting in the great hall." She led me downstairs and through parts of the building I hadn't seen earlier, finally emerging into a vast space clearly designed for pack gatherings. Stone pillars supported a high ceiling, with openings near the top that allowed moonlight to spill onto the floor in silver pools. A large fire burned in a central pit, surrounded by concentric circles of seating. Logs and stone benches arranged to accommodate dozens. Most of those seats were already filled. My entrance caused an immediate hush, all eyes turning to assess the stranger in their midst. At the far side of the hall, a semicircle of elevated seats held 9 figures, the council, I presumed, with Dominic at the center, his position slightly higher than the others. Nora guided me to an open space before them, directly in the path of the strongest shaft of moonlight. The strategic positioning wasn't lost on me. Whatever happened here, it would happen under the moon's witness. Elder Thorne, seated to Dominic's right, raised his hands for silence, though the room had already grown deathly quiet. "We convene this council," he intoned formally, "to address a matter of significance to all 7 territories. Today, King Blackthorn returned from the human lands with one who wears the Moonshadow crest. We gathered to determine the truth of her identity and what it means for the packs." His gaze fell heavily upon me. "Step forward, daughter of the Forest Edge, and present yourself to the Council of Alphas." Heart pounding, I stepped into the pool of moonlight. The silver light seemed to intensify around me, and the pendant at my throat grew warm against my skin. "My name is Emma," I began, then hesitated. That name belonged to the human world, to a life that seemed increasingly distant, though I now understand that may not be my birth name. For 10 years I've lived among humans, hiding what I am, shifting only in secret when the moon was full. A murmur rippled through the gathered werewolves. One of the council members, a broad-shouldered woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair, leaned forward. "How came you to possess the Moonshadow pendant?" she demanded. "It's the only thing I have from my mother," I replied, lifting the crescent so it caught the moonlight. "She left it with me the night she hid me at the edge of the forest, before the human family found me." "Convenient," said another council member, a lean man with a scar running down one cheek. "A pendant can be stolen, memories can be implanted or invented. What proof have we this is not some ploy by our enemies?" Dominic's voice cut through the rising tension. Council member Reed speaks prudently, if bluntly. His amber eyes fixed on me. "The pendant is compelling evidence, but not conclusive. If you are truly a Moonshadow, your wolf form will bear the markings of your bloodline." I swallowed hard, suddenly understanding. "You want me to shift? Here? Now?" "Under moonlight, before the council," Elder Thorne confirmed. "It is the surest way to know." Fear and uncertainty coursed through me. In 10 years, I had never shifted before witnesses. The change had always been a desperately private thing, performed far from human eyes in the depths of the forest. And now they asked me to expose this most vulnerable aspect of myself to an entire hall of strangers. Yet beneath that fear lay something else, a yearning to finally be seen as I truly was, to shed the human disguise completely, and stand revealed in my wolf form before others, who would understand rather than fear. The moonlight seemed to call to me, its silver touch awakening the change that always lurked beneath my skin. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar heat begin to build along my spine. "Wait," came Dominic's command, sharp and unexpected. My eyes flew open to find him standing, attention directed not at me but toward the hall's entrance. "We have an uninvited guest." The assembled werewolves turned as one, a low growl building from dozens of throats as a new figure strode into the hall. He moved with arrogant confidence, flanked by 2 hard-faced guards who scanned the crowd with predatory awareness. The newcomer was tall and powerfully built, with silver-streaked black hair and cold gray eyes. He wore leather armor adorned with what looked like animal teeth, and multiple weapons hung from his belt. Everything about him radiated aggressive dominance. "Vane Stoneclaw," Elder Thorne acknowledged, his tone carefully neutral. "You come unannounced to a closed council meeting. Vane's thin smile never reached his eyes. When matters concern all territories, all alphas should be present, especially when rumors speak of a ghost returned from the dead. His gaze fell on me with calculated intensity, or should I say, a phantom conjured to disrupt the balance of power we've maintained since the unfortunate tragedy of the Moonshadow massacre. Dominic's posture shifted subtly, his body angling between me and the newcomer. You surrendered your weapons at the border, I trust. Vane spread his hands in a gesture of mock innocence, as pack law requires. Though one might question why such formalities exist between allies. We are not allies, Dominic replied coldly. We maintain peace through law and counsel. Peace you threaten by entering uninvited. Peace I preserve, Vane countered, by ensuring this council is not deceived by an obvious impostor. His predatory gaze returned to me. A convenient puppet wearing a stolen pendant. The tension in the great hall crystallized into something dangerous. I felt the collective anger of the Night Runners rising around me like a physical force. Their Alpha King had been challenged, their hospitality insulted. Dominic himself remained outwardly calm, but the slight shift in his stance conveyed lethal readiness. You accuse without evidence, Elderthorn said, his aged voice carrying surprising authority. While we seek truth through proper ritual. Vane Stoneclaw's cold smile widened. Evidence? I have lived the history she supposedly emerges from. I was there the night the Moonshadow pack fell. I saw the bodies. His gaze cut to me, including the body of a child who would be approximately her age now. A chill ran through me. Was he claiming to have seen my corpse? The implications were staggering. Either he was lying, or I wasn't who even I thought I might be. You never reported finding a child's body, Dominic countered, his voice dangerously soft. The official record of that night makes no such mention. War creates chaos. Details get lost. Vane shrugged with calculated indifference. But I know what I saw. The Moonshadow line ended that night, and this... He gestured dismissively toward me. This performance insults their memory. I had remained silent during this exchange, struggling to process these new claims against the fragments of memory I possessed. But something about Vane's certainty, the specific way he emphasized having seen a child's body, triggered a flash of recollection. A woman's voice, urgent and terrified. Play dead. No matter what happens, no matter who comes, don't move, don't breathe, don't even blink. The memory was so vivid, so sudden, that I gasped aloud, drawing all eyes back to me. You remember something, Dominic observed, his keen gaze missing nothing. I nodded slowly. My mother's voice. She told me to play dead, to not move no matter who came. My eyes found Vane's face, studying it with new purpose. You didn't see a dead child. You saw a child pretending to be dead. Something flickered in Vane's expression. Surprise, quickly masked by contempt. Convenient memories, appearing just when needed. Next she'll claim to remember me specifically. I don't, I admitted, but I remember fear, not just of humans, but of werewolves who came after. My hand went instinctively to the pendant. She hid me among humans to protect me from our own kind. The female council member who had spoken earlier leaned forward. There is a simple way to settle this. Let her shift, as the ritual demands. A true Moonshadow cannot hide her nature in wolf form. Indeed. Vane agreed with sudden eagerness that made me uneasy. Let us see this supposed miracle. Shift, girl, if you truly carry the blood you claim. His challenge sparked something primal within me. Wolf pride against wolf pride. The moonlight streaming through the high windows seemed to intensify, calling to the change that always simmered beneath my skin. I stepped more fully into its silver path, feeling its energy course through me. I make no claims, I said, holding Vane's gaze steadily. I seek only truth. If this will reveal it, so be it. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the transformation that had been both burden and secret joy throughout my years among humans. The familiar heat built along my spine, spreading outward through muscle and bone. My body knew this dance, had performed it countless times under countless moons, though never before witnesses. The change took me swiftly, perhaps propelled by the emotional intensity of the moment, perhaps by the sacred space and ritual context. Bones reshaped, muscles flowed, Skin gave way to fur. I dropped to all fours as my body completed its metamorphosis, opening eyes that now perceived the world through a wolf's heightened senses. The great hall erupted in gasps and exclamations. Through wolf ears, I heard hearts racing, breaths catching. Through wolf eyes, I saw expressions of awe, disbelief, even fear on some faces. Most startling was Dominic's reaction. The composed Alpha King looked thunderstruck, his amber eyes wide with wonder. "Moon's grace," Elder Thorn whispered, rising from his seat. "It's true." I couldn't see myself, couldn't understand what caused such reaction. But Vane's face told its own story, shock giving way to calculated rage, his hand instinctively moving to where a weapon would normally hang. "Impossible," he hissed. The moon shadow line was extinguished. I made certain... He cut himself off, but too late. Dominic moved with blinding speed, crossing the space between them before Vane could retreat. "You made certain?" he growled, voice barely human. "Choose your next words with extreme care, Stoneclaw. They may be your last as an alpha." Trapped by his own admission, Vane's demeanor shifted from arrogance to dangerous cornered predator. The moon shadows would have destroyed everything, the old ways, the natural hierarchy. Their talk of peace with humans, of finding balance. Weakness disguised as wisdom. As they faced off, I remained in wolf form, watching through animal eyes that perceived truth differently. The pieces began falling into place. Vane's involvement in the massacre, my mother's desperate attempt to hide me from my own kind, the decade of secrecy and fear. But something else demanded attention, my reflection in the polished stone floor. I saw why my shift had caused such reaction. My wolf form was unlike any I'd glimpsed in my solitary forest runs. My fur was not the gray or brown I'd expected, but pure white with silver markings, particularly a crescent pattern on my chest that mirrored the pendant, and most startling of all, my fur seemed to catch and hold the moonlight, giving me an ethereal glow that illuminated the space around me. Elder Thorn approached slowly, respectfully, as one might approach something sacred. "The silver wolf returns," he intoned. "As the ancient texts foretold." Vane's guards exchanged alarmed glances, clearly reassessing their position. Their alpha had inadvertently confessed to orchestrating the massacre of an entire pack, a crime punishable by death under werewolf law, and now faced not only the Alpha King, but a living symbol whose existence threatened everything he'd built. With a snarl of desperation, Vane lunged, not at Dominic as everyone expected, but at me. "The line ends here, truly this time." His shift began mid-leap, clothes tearing as his massive form emerged, dark gray, battle-scarred, frightening in its raw power. But he never reached me. Dominic intercepted him with his own explosive shift, meeting Vane's attack with a counterstrike that sent the other alpha sprawling across the stone floor. Dominic's wolf form was magnificent, midnight black with amber eyes that glowed with protective fury. His size alone marked him as the dominant alpha, but the controlled power of his movements revealed why he ruled the 7 territories. The two circled each other in the center of the hall, hackles raised, teeth bared in ritual combat that would end only one way. The council and assembled pack members withdrew to the edges of the room, forming a ring around this ancient form of justice. As a wolf, my instincts screamed to join the fight, to help destroy the one who had murdered my family, who had forced me into a decade of hiding and half-life. But Elder Thorn's hand on my scruff held me back. "This is between alphas," he murmured. "And long overdue." The fight that followed was both beautiful and terrible. 2 apex predators in their prime, one fighting for power, the other for justice. Vane had size and brute strength, but Dominic possessed something more refined, strategic brilliance and legitimacy that gave his attacks moral weight. When it ended, it was decisive. Dominic stood over Vane's throat, jaws positioned for the killing bite, amber eyes seeking judgment from the council. The vote came not in words but in gesture. One by one, the council members turned their backs on Vane, signifying his excision from the pack structure, his life forfeit for his crimes. With a swift, merciful movement, Dominic ended the threat Vane had posed for over a decade. Justice, served in the ancient way of our kind. In the aftermath, I shifted back to human form, someone draping a cloak around my shoulders as I stood shakily. The emotional weight of revelations, of transformation, of witnessed violence left me feeling raw and exposed. Dominic approached after his own shift back, now dressed in a robe someone had provided. Blood, not his own, stained his hands, yet he moved with the calm assurance of one who had done what duty required. "The council has their answer," he said quietly, "for my ears alone. As do you, I think." I nodded, unable to find adequate words for this moment of terrible truth and unexpected belonging. My mother, my pack, they died because they sought peace. Balance, they died because Vane and those like him fear change, Dominic corrected. The moon shadows were keepers of ancient wisdom, that werewolves and humans share this world, that neither can truly thrive through dominance alone. Your bloodline has always stood at the crossroads between worlds. "And now?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elder Thorn joined us, his weathered face solemn yet hopeful. "Now the council must decide how best to restore what was lost. The Moonshadow territory has stood empty these past years, maintained in trust should any of the bloodline return. I don't know how to be an alpha," I protested. "I barely know how to be a werewolf. I've never had a pack." "You won't be alone," Dominic said, something new in his voice. Not just the respect of one alpha for another, but something more personal. "The Night Runners will stand with you while you rebuild. I will stand with you." The promise in those words carried weight beyond political alliance. I met his amber gaze, recognizing the connection that had sparked between us from that first moment at the Hunter's Ball. Predator recognizing predator, yes, but also something rarer. Equals recognizing each other across the divide of different experiences. "There is much to learn," Elder Thorn cautioned. "The Moonshadow gifts are not just the silver fur and moonlight affinity you've already displayed. Your bloodline carries abilities that must be rediscovered, trained." "What abilities?" I asked, finally voicing the question that had hovered unanswered since I'd arrived. Dominic and the Elder exchanged glances. "The Moonshadows were mediators between worlds," Dominic explained. "In practical terms, that meant unusual control over shifting, the ability to partial shift, to maintain human reason in wolf form, to change without the moon's influence. But more importantly," Elder Thorn continued, "they could sense truth, see beyond deception. Their judgment was valued because it was unclouded by politics or personal gain. That gift, more than any physical ability, made them essential to pack harmony." I thought of my years among humans, how I'd always sensed the disconnect between what people said and what they meant, how I'd instinctively known whom to trust. Had that been more than simple intuition? In the days that followed, everything changed. Vane's co-conspirators were identified and brought to justice. The Stoneclaw Pack, largely innocent of their alpha's crimes, chose a new leader who pledged loyalty to the council. My true name, Aurora Moonshadow, was confirmed through records salvaged from the massacre, and I began the slow process of reclaiming my heritage. Each day brought new discoveries. Training with Dominic to control my shifting, learning pack laws and histories from Elder Thorn, connecting with distant Moonshadow relatives who had been away from the territory on the night of the massacre and survived. Most transformative was the freedom to be fully myself, neither human nor wolf, but the balance between both that my bloodline had always represented. The pendant that had been my only link to my mother now hung proudly visible, no longer a secret talisman, but a symbol of restored balance. 1 month after my arrival, I stood with Dominic on a ridge overlooking what would soon be rebuilt as Moonshadow territory. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust, the moon nearly full. "Are you ready?" he asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "For what comes next? Building a pack? Learning to be an alpha?" I smiled, squeezing his fingers. "Or for us." His amber eyes gleamed in the moonlight, reflecting the same certainty I felt. All of it. Together. As our lips met beneath the watching moon, I felt the final piece of my fragmented self slide into place. No more hiding, no more fear. I had found my true name, my true form, my true place, and someone to share it with who saw me clearly, completely, and chose me anyway. Together, we would rebuild what had been lost, creating something stronger from the ashes of the past. The hidden moon had finally emerged from shadow, and her light would never be extinguished again.